Susan, I am so excited to have you. Welcome to the Rising Beyond podcast.
Thank you for having me, Sybil.
Yeah, I'm really excited because in the last, I don't know, I've been doing this work 12, 13 years, like very specialized in working with the air quotes high conflict divorce. And I run into a lot of families where the children have special needs, and that is your specialty. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about what you do and how you wound up there.
Okay, good question. So, the short version of how I wound up here is I was an educator, a school teacher, administrator, college professor, educational consultant for 20 years. And then when I went through my own divorce, I'm a mom of three, and my oldest has severe, severe special needs. He said, "Why is this happening to me?" I wanted to hide under the covers, but when you're a mom, you can't do that. So I had an epiphany, maybe so I can help others. So I switched from education consultant to divorce consultant. And I did not even know about the certified divorce coach program until a couple of years in. And so really the high conflict divorce is what I went through: hidden money, custody battles, domestic abuse. And it was really, wow, I had a great attorney, but your attorney went to law school for a reason, right? And there should be other resources out there. So I saw the benefits of the team approach. And I also started doing some research and talking to people. And everyone's heard half the country gets divorced, but the research shows that 80% of people who have a special needs child get divorced. So it's much higher, and they get divorced before that child's 21. Now, often, age 21, a child's independent, they've gone to college or vocational school. A special needs child, depending on where they are on the range of special needs, likely isn't. So it's just a lot more that a divorcing parent has to deal with. And so to be a resource to help them, and then you'll probably ask more about this, but just to, give your audience some information, often high conflict individuals have mental health issues, personality issues, addictions, and children with special needs, genetic and environmental. So you have a parent who has a lot going on, or at least one of them. And so the rate in high conflict divorce with special needs is very high, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, and the audience knows this. I have ADHD, and so I sometimes bounce around, but my
Yeah.
brain is like going crazy with thoughts. Is so often what we see, even right. I'm in a mental health practice. I work with adults, but we specialize in working with children. And there is such I don't know if pushback is even the right word because it's bigger than that. But when we are dealing with someone who has narcissistic traits or antisocial traits, and we're even suggesting like, hey, maybe get some ADHD testing, which in my world is like, first of all, my superpower. But to them, it is an affront. And it is like, this scary is not the right word, but it's like, oh my gosh, there is nothing wrong with my child. And so there is a different weight of having a special needs child if you are in that personality disordered realm.
Well, that is absolutely true. And again, referring to the research, often a narcissist will think that they're superior, they're self centered, they're better than everyone, they're elite, they're entitled, and they see a child as like an extension of themselves. And if they're perfect, how could their child be anything but not perfect? So if you try to imply that the child might have some additional needs, right? And often children with certain needs also have, like you said, a superpower is certain strength. So it's not an all bad thing, but they don't want to hear it. And in a divorce, when you're talking about decision making for education, medical, and everyday decisions, and one parent is saying, let's get some doctors, some medication, some therapies, and the other saying, no, they're perfectly fine. It
Yeah.
is extremely exhausting for the parent who wants to help the child who's, coming across all these roadblocks and obstacles.
Yes. Yes. And what we also know, because my background, even kind of before coercive control and domestic violence is child abuse, neglect, sexual abuse.
Yes.
We know that special needs kids are at a significantly higher risk for child abuse, neglect, and sexual abuse.
And I'll take it one step further. Our country's most severe special needs children end up in therapeutic schools and sometimes therapeutic boarding schools. And
Yes.
there are not cameras there, and there are staff who take advantage, and there's not checks and balances, or there's children who don't have the verbal skills to explain what's going on, or who are gaslighted and don't understand that they're being manipulated and gaslighted.
Yeah.
So it is rampant in this country, and it's certainly an issue and certainly something that we can strive to try to correct, but you're absolutely right. And, people turn from it and instead of trying to fix it.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, right, people are searching for just a child therapist that understands
Yes.
a high conflict divorce. But man, searching for a child therapist that specializes in working with kids with special needs and understand
Yes.
coercive control, domestic violence, child abuse, neglect, that's more than a unicorn, I would assume, for so many families. Where do you feel like the resources are just other than that? Because, oh my gosh, I know that's lacking.
Mhm.
Where
Yes.
do you feel like the resources or the gaps are just there? Like there's not enough support?
I think that in general, it's crazy how we're in the year 2025 and we've come so far in technology. We've come so far in so many fields in the last 50, 100 years. But when you talk about mental health and when you talk about childhood diagnoses, it is still in the beginning stages of research. The money's not there. The researchers are not there. People don't it's not where drug companies, right? This is where the big drug companies wanna go, it's
Yes.
there. And then we also have politicians, I won't get into more than that, who are
Right?
obstacles and actually reducing services and reducing funds for these families. And so it's sad to say, but I think in the near future, there's actually gonna be more problems before the problems are fixed.
I agree and am, yep, constantly trying to, figure out like, okay, how are we going to support people who are not going to have the support, the financial support? How are we going to help families maybe who have waivers for services? How are we going to help more people that would have Medicaid and now they may not have Medicaid? What can we do as a mental health community? Because I agree that things are going to get worse and hopefully then get better,
Yes.
but it's gonna take a huge, huge push from not just people that specialize in working with special needs kids.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there are some other countries who we can be modeled after, right? And different jurisdictions, but it's probably an overwhelming issue. And sadly, a lot of people, if it doesn't touch home to them, that's not where they want to see money's going. And that's where they say, oh, that's sad, but they don't care. Right. And
Yeah.
so it does affect our country, it affects our future, and knowing that there can be things to reduce the problems, especially early interventions for children as well. And I also think if you look at workers who work with families that have special needs children, they are the highest burnout rate in the country,
Yeah.
higher than police, higher than fire, higher than nurses. And so to have qualified people to have a career of it, most of them don't last more than 3 to 7 years. So it's
Yeah.
kind of also low paid, burnout rate, and
Yep.
so
Yeah, there's so many systemic factors, and that's really one of the things we talk so much about on this podcast is how do we make impact not just on an individual level, but on this more systemic level? Because that, for greater change, that's where we need to put our focus. And at the same time, you and I work with people.
yeah.
Like we work with these individual people and families. So, what are some of the greatest challenges that you see working with a family? Everyone listening to this is somehow connected to a high conflict or abusive divorce situation. What are the challenges that you see in high conflict divorce with special needs kids?
Okay. Well, divorce comes down to custody and finance. And so when you're not in an amicable divorce, right there, everything is escalated. And related to custody, we have the physical custody, which is the parenting schedule. We have legal custody, which is decision making. So for high conflict for physical custody, who they're going to be with on Monday nights, on Christmas Eve, right? The holiday schedule and the regular.
Mhm.
A special needs child often needs extra structure versus a high conflict divorce. They are parenting totally differently. They
Yeah.
are counter parenting, purposely trying to, so I really try to teach my clients how to co parent or at least co parent to court and parallel parent in their own lives. So they
Yes.
kind of, live their life and set boundaries, but try to do that. So certainly the parenting schedule for these children is extremely hard. The parents are trying to protect their children, not alienate their children, but the protective parent often is being accused of alienating.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And so that's with the physical schedule related to legal decision making. If you have a child who doesn't have additional needs, there's less decision making. But a child with special needs, education, what school, extra classes, the medical, doctors, therapists, medications, and then the everyday. It's so much more decision making, and the decision making ties into the finances, right? And
Yes.
we get over to the financial section, and for child support, historically, child support would end at 18 or 21, depending on the state. And what happens to that special needs child, especially if it's a high conflict individual who's being financially abusive or other doesn't want to take care of them, all the burden falls on one parent. So luckily, New York, where I am, has extended child support for special needs children to 26. Texas has a lifetime child support, so it's amazing
Oh,
for special
wow.
children. And California, I'm just using some states. California,
Mhm.
you can apply for adult child support. So you have to go back and say this young a dependent adult now needs it. And so there is a trend with that, but of course, it's an uphill battle and not all the states have it. And then
Yeah.
relate to the add-on expenses, right? A lot of times in a high conflict divorce, there's hidden money and they look at income. Well, if someone owns a business or has a cash business or is hiding money, the other parent is having to pay more than they technically should. So there's so many layers. So we really help them. The other issue is historically, when someone has a special needs child, they have a family where it's not two working parents. One of them will stay with
Yes.
the child to take them to therapies, to deal with all the extra fireballs being thrown at them. And so one of them works extra hard or two jobs or a job and a half. When you get divorced, because you're sharing that parenting time, all of a sudden the caregiver now has to go back to work. And who knows
Mhm.
what's lost and training and how long they've been out of the workforce. And the worker now has to either cut their budget or become a caregiver or hire a caregiver on their parenting time. So there's just so many details. And that's why I helped create the National Association Divorce Professionals Special Needs chapter to bring professionals together. There are so many divorce attorneys who, on their intake form, don't ask. They'll say, "How old is your child?" But they won't say, "Do they have an IEP? Do they have additional needs?"
Right.
And getting that little step to them is so important. So finding those resources. And then I also created with some colleagues the Certified Divorce Coach Special Needs curriculum, which is like a graduate program after they get their
Mhm.
certified divorce coaching. And it goes through all of this because these parents appreciate the extra handholding. And we give them the right questions to ask the trust and estate attorney for first and third party trust. We give them the right questions to ask the divorce attorney. We give them the right questions to ask their financial expert, right? For Medicaid, for SSDI money and guardianship. So we really help do it right the first time by finding these resources, and they are national. The other thing that I can say, and I'm sure you've heard this also from other people, is often if there's a sibling who doesn't have special needs and it's a high conflict divorce, that sibling who looks like they're doing okay is left out in the wind. And
Mhm.
so we also are training others. You have to, of course, look at the child with a disability, but look at the sibling and try to figure out what works best for them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, very often there is the
Yes,
invisible sibling or the invisible child,
yes.
because even if there's not a special need that you would diagnose, because I have thoughts on that too, but the one that fawns the best
Mhm.
is often more forgotten about because they're not presenting with the
Yeah.
behaviors, they're not presenting with the challenges. And so they're forgotten too. So I'm so glad that you all look at that as well. And something that came up for me that I was like I felt my whole body just sink with exhaustion of so many of the mamas, sometimes males, like the Rising Beyond community that I run is specifically for female identifying parents, but we work with males in my therapy practice. But so often they're counting down the days till their child ages out because the fight gets so much less. If you have a special needs child who is not going to live independently, you don't have the same countdown, aging out process. And I hadn't even, like, it was in my mind that I knew of this, but really feeling the weight of it as you were talking of, like, oh my goodness, these
Yeah.
families don't get the same countdown.
It is very, very true, but I can't tell you the silver lining because, like I said, when this happened to me, high conflict divorce and a severely special needs child, you really do wanna hide under the covers, right? So when it happened to me, you look for silver linings, and the one thing I tell families that have similar situations is that if it was a non-divorce family, you're just trying to stay afloat, trying to keep
Mhm.
up with the Joneses, and even a birthday party is difficult with a special needs
Yeah.
a child, a family reunion, a picnic. Everything takes so much additional work to try to make that child feel comfortable and not have them triggered. But so these families often don't do long-term planning as far as financials, right? And they're
Mhm.
just trying to stay afloat and not think about the future. When you go through a divorce, you're forced to think about the financial future and the caregiving. And so at least these families can sleep well at night saying, I have a plan. We now have guardianship. We now have a special needs trust. We now have, applied for SSDI money. We now have a letter of intent where what we would like to happen, God forbid something happens to the caregiver, right? And so that is the silver lining that the divorce almost forces them into being able to plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that because sometimes that forced functioning
Yes.
is right in the moment, whoa, exhausting, really hard. And then afterwards, it's like, oh, thank goodness that piece is done.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you know you have enough information, you have the right support in place, then you can figure out the next best steps. And
Ab
when you're not doing that, the next best steps, it's just not clear. So often it's just not clear.
It is true, and just like a trust and estate attorney would tell you, it's not, quote, "one and done," right? A trust and estate attorney would say every 5 to 10 years or every time you hit some type of milestone, go back and look at the plan. But the bottom line is once you actually have your plan, you're just going back to review and tweak it, right? It's not a big ordeal again. So it is something that should be ongoing. Certainly, when you're in a high conflict divorce, communication amongst both parents is difficult. I always recommend a parenting app. There's 5, 6, 7 out there.
Right.
But I think it's extra important for families that have special needs and high conflict because no one can gaslight anyone. It's there. They can't change the date or timestamp. They can't say they didn't read it because it shows they read it. You can put information about child medication or you can put full information in one place. And often post-divorce, in a high conflict situation, there's post-divorce abuse going on. It's
Oh,
not
yes.
like an amicable where you sign the agreement and put it in the drawer. And so when you have a parenting app that you can document everything on, if you have to go back to court or when you have to go back to court, it's very easy to use as evidence. So we try to get the families to do that. It sets boundaries and it really, especially because not that you should ever have the child be the messenger, but often these children cannot
They
communicate.
can't be the messenger.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, and so here it is almost the voice of what the child would need to tell them, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was thinking, so unfortunately, a lot of my audience, based on finances, has
Yeah.
to go pro se.
Yes.
So a lot of questions that I get, and we are not giving legal advice, FYI, everybody listening, y'all know that that's my caveat all the time. But what are some things if someone is having to review, create from, scratch their parenting plan for their special need child, which again, I say that like there's a cookie, like, oh, this is how you do it for every special needs child. Oh my gosh, there's so many nuances based on so many different pieces of that. But what are some things that you found to be really helpful? It's like, hey, if you can really focus on this one thing or these couple of things in your parenting plan, you are going to be able to close up some of the loopholes that your partner is going to exploit.
Yes. So I do think that if you have a special needs child, having a tiered parenting plan is important. So it's kind of saying, like, okay, the goal might be to have the child 50-50 at both parents, right? Ideally, the parents are involved and the child can go back and forth. But because a lot of these children, change is extra hard, right? And
Yeah.
so let's say that until the child gets to kindergarten, they'll spend most school nights with mom and then dad on the weekends. And once they get to kindergarten, then they can start doing an extra night or two. And so, related to not only age appropriate, but developmentally appropriate. Once the child is out of diapers, once the child can, verbally communicate, once the child can learn sign language to show what they, so, like putting in benchmarks and having the other parent know our goal is shared parenting, but there's some things we need to do to get along the way. And it goes to the same as far as benchmarks for a high conflict individual. If they are an addict, putting in drug testing,
Yes.
putting in after a psych eval, after a series of supervised visits, after a series of blank number of, breathalyzer
Mm.
tests. So really all of that as well. So I'm a big fan of tiered parenting plans with benchmarks. And then also, I say the word consequences, but
Right.
if that parent does get a DUI or if the drug test does come back, then okay, we're going back to step. Then we're not having sleepovers or then we're having supervised visits. If they don't pass the anger management or if,
Yes.
if they're not able to get the child to school 3 times in X number of days, then the child not sleeping over on school days. So really having the goal of we want this to happen, but we're concerned. Here's the plan, assuming it goes smooth. But if it doesn't, then it's almost like chutes and ladders, right? You can go up,
Yes.
but then you go back as well.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and this might be location specific, it might be judge specific, but do you see judges being more willing and attorneys maybe even being more willing to set the if this then when there is a documented child with special needs?
So what I tell everyone is anything goes in mediation, anything goes in settlement offers, in discussions outside the courtroom hallway, at the judge's bench, anything goes. Where it doesn't go is if the parties don't agree and the judge decides. And then it's very black and white. The good
Got it.
news is that in 49 of the 50 states, custody's never set in stone. So
Yes.
physical and legal. So they can always go back. California does that have the Montenegro law. So it can be set in stone, which is a little scary. But
Yeah.
I often tell my clients, so for example, I'm in New York, but literally I could kick a soccer ball into New Jersey. I'm right on the border. I'm that close. And New Jersey is literally the out of all 50 states, 50-50, 15 nights at mom's, 15 nights at dad's, pro father's rights. They don't care if it's a convicted child sex offender, that parent will get 15 nights. And so what I tell my New Jersey parents and other states that are similar is you can always fight it at the back end, right? So it's like, are you going to spend tens, hundreds of $1,000s at the front end where the judge is going to say, we're not going to do what ifs, we're going to give this opportunity, but it's easier to take it away. Now, that is certainly scary, right? Like I recommend,
Yes.
obviously, if it's a young child, the gizmo watch, if they can't have their cell phone. And I try to recommend different cameras and different ways and putting in that they can do FaceTimes just so a parent can see, right? And certain things to help reassure about safety issues. But it's really leverage and convincing the parent and then letting yourself know that you can always go at the back end and readjust it.
Yeah, because I think that right, it is so scary, and I've seen it a little bit more judges when it has gone to court and the judge is making decisions, when it's well documented, through Children's Hospital, through certain providers about the level of need and care that is required, they have been a little bit more open to not using the cookie cutter parenting
Yes,
approaches.
absolutely. I always say doctor, therapist, guidance counselor, police report, ER. Like these are the professionals. It's not someone's mom, neighbor, or best friend
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
what, but when a professional can stand up there and say, this is best for the child. There's also parenting coordinators, which is risky because it could go either way.
Right? And so you're like, who
Mm,
did you
yeah.
get? Who?
And then there is some states call it an AFC, an attorney for the child. Others call it a guardian ad litem, a GA.
GALs. We have
And
CLRs. Like, there's so many
yeah,
stupid letters. So
yeah.
many letters.
And so those people are supposed to be the voice of a child. The problem is if they're too young or nonverbal, then you can ask
Yes.
to observe, right? And observe how that child reacts to the other parent. I do tell people when it's a custody battle, does your child wanna go with the other parent? Because if they run up and hug mom or dad and the other parent is trying to fight them, it's now even 10 times harder because
Yes.
obviously, it's easier if the child is scared to go. But you get into crazy things. You get into reunification therapy, you get into reunification camps, you get into lots of manipulation. And I do have to say, when you have high net worth clients or
Yeah.
prenups or postnups where one client has an advantage or a property state where it's not equitable distribution, often there are times where the one who has more finances will just keep going because they know that they can. So I
Yeah.
understand about the pro se and how some people want to keep that going and just can't afford it, but in their heart of hearts can't sleep at night knowing I'm
Yeah.
not alienating my kid because I'm spiteful. I'm protecting my child for their safety. And that's
Yeah.
and that's what we hope the judges and all the third parties see. But as a certified divorce coach and a certified high conflict divorce coach, I really help my clients communicate to the third parties. So, for example, a tip for your listeners is so many people are saying, my ex is a narcissist. My
Oh,
ex.
yes. Yep.
So, what I say is write down the last 18 months of stuff that your ex did that's just awful, right? And then circle the 3 to 5 worst things in that last 18 months, 3 to 5 things that are close to abuse and neglect. Some might be abuse and neglect, but some might be like close to abuse or close to neglect. And that's what you're going to use to profile your ex or soon to be ex. And that's what you're going to tell your attorney, who's going to tell the judge, or that if they're pro se, they're going to tell the judge these 3 to 5 things. Because if they go in and say, he's a narcissist or she, the judge is going to roll their eyes. But if they say,
Yes.
tell you 3 things that have happened in the last year. And they left cocaine on the table and my 3-year-old got hold of it and was, all over. wow, mouth drop, right? Or
Yes.
they let my child run across the highway. I like, what? Because they were drunk? What? Like, so you pick those strong. Otherwise, if you just have a list, even if it's in time order, some of the things aren't bad. I tell the clients all the time, I understand if mom or dad is letting them stay up late, have chocolate for dinner, not give a bath. All these things make parents cringe. A judge doesn't care. It's not abuse to do that. It's poor parenting, but the judges so often are overwhelmed with abuse and neglect that they get frustrated when someone says they're not giving them broccoli at dinner. That the
Yeah.
judge is going to deal with that. So helping them profile their ex, know how to communicate to the third parties as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk so much on the podcast in the community about how survivors a lot of times show up
Yeah.
with the legal professionals in the case and why they want to share the context,
Mhm.
but you can't share the context initially because you're going to lose people.
Yeah.
And so really focusing, and I'm glad you in a little bit different way of how to do it, but we talk about like what are your, 3 to 4 key points or
Yeah.
asks. Like
Yes.
that's where we start.
Yes.
And also it is like we are not labeling anything.
Yes.
We are sharing our observations and things that happened. Like there's no labels
Yeah.
because right, unless you have fancy letters after your name, you don't get to diagnose
Right.
people, right? And because it's so common, especially now,
Yes.
the term narcissist flies everywhere. And so, yeah, you just want to share those observations. And then how are you speaking about it is so important. And we see you because you're also freaking exhausted.
Mhm.
Being a single parent,
Yes.
which a lot of you are, even if you're still with your partner, you're a single parent. But man, all of this is exhausting. All of
It is.
it's exhausting.
And I can relate. I am a full-time single mom because the judge took away my ex's rights, and again, with a severely special needs child, and at the time, my children were very young. Now they're getting a little older, but it is certainly a lot, and people feel alone, and that's why I created with one of my colleagues, the divorcewithspecialneedschildren.com website. That's why I
Mhm.
always give a free consult, like how you ask about what resources. I always give a free, even if I know someone can't pay and they say, I'm on food stamps, I'm in Section 8 housing. You know what? Take the free consult because I will give you things to walk away with as well. And, there's resources out there. I'm one of the One Mom's Battle, Tina Swithin's high conflict divorce coach
Mhm.
instructors. I teach for 3 of her modules. And she has a documentation class. So I really try to share resources that are affordable to people who can't afford this so that if they do have to go pro se, can go in as well prepared as possible. And then what I do say is that, you know, in an ideal situation, you have representation during the divorce, right? And
Right.
all states will give that to you. If there's a restraining order or abuse, they will help you. So sometimes high conflict do get it, even related to the economics over someone who's amicable and doesn't have the economics to pay, but the finances to pay. But post divorce, if you have a contract that was done right, you could go back to enforce or modify it. So if someone says, I only have X amount of money, it's more important to have an attorney during the divorce and get a good contract. And then post divorce, not hire an
Mhm.
attorney because you're just trying to enforce or modify it. So it's much easier to be pro se post divorce than it is during divorce.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too, just even from the healing perspective of, right? Like the healing timeline
Yes.
from an coercively and abusive relationship,
Yes.
it does not match that court timeline, not even close, right? The trauma work that is needed, and I've talked about this on I feel like a fairly recent podcast, but trauma work is created for when you are safe.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
guess what? You all are not actually still safe. And so the length of time that the trauma work, and I say that kind of generally, there's a lot of different modalities and things like that,
Yeah.
but that trauma work is going to take longer,
Yeah.
and your nervous system is going to take longer to feel safe. And
Mhm.
so if you are just leaving, just starting the divorce process, man, it is really important. Again, finances very much understand. And that's one reason why, the community is the way it is. And we offer so many resources just like you, because you need a team, even if that can't be an attorney. Maybe you just consult with the attorney. Maybe they just review your paperwork. But having people around you is going to be one of the most important things.
The other thing I can add to that is someone who's divorcing someone who's high conflict, or I have a lot of clients where it's a custody issue, it's not divorce. They were never married.
Mhm.
So they're still dealing with parenting time and child support and getting add-ons paid for, but there's no equitable distribution, right? But the pre-divorce work, as far as getting your ducks in order financially, as much information as you can, and getting your children set up for success, right? As
Yeah.
much as I talk about giving your children traditions that will carry over to a separate home and modeling these traditions and having open lines of communication from age 2 to 22. Like, there's little things that we say, every day, ask your child, "Is there anything you wanna ask me? Is there anything you wanna tell me?" That way they don't feel like they're coming home and mom says, "What happened at dad's? Was his girlfriend there?
Yeah.
Did sh" yeah,
Yeah.
it's, "Is there anything you wanna" so really giving these parents skills and setting them up pre-divorce, because a high conflict divorce is more likely to happen in court, which is 10 to 18 months
Yep.
on average throughout this country. Some places are 36 months, it's ridiculous. Most
Yes.
less than 10, but trying to I say it's not a race, it's a marathon. So even if someone said, "I know I can't afford an attorney," but having a free consult at the beginning so I can help them. You never wanna
Yes.
tell a narcissist, "I'm gonna divorce you," until you are literally ready to serve them papers.
Ready to go.
Money will move around, things will happen, they will try to turn it on you and trigger you, they will record you, they will make the non-crazy person, the normal person, look like the bad parent and the crazy one, and sadly, it's happened one too many times for people who come, and then we're swimming upstream trying to
Yes.
them get back on track.
Yep. Yep. It is so hard. And I'm sure you run into this too. Like, gosh, if only you knew that you needed my help sooner.
I know, and it's never too late. I tell people,
No,
if you come
no.
post-divorce, it's better late than never, but in an ideal situation, you're finding me from day one, right? Like,
Yes.
just
Right.
because it makes a difference on so many levels, and I help people mistakes to avoid. I do free information Zooms 1, 2, 3 times a month. People can follow me on social media,
Yes.
and, you know, of course, it's not case specific, but knowledge is power. So when they have these free information Zooms on high conflict, on divorce with special needs, children, it's like, okay, I have some hope in sight. I have a plan. I know what questions to ask, helping people know
Yes.
that it's going to be okay, but you can make it smoother and navigate it better if you get help from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we wrap up, I definitely want to get that website again and how people can reach you because, on the Rising Beyond podcast and just in my community in general, there's so many nuances
Yeah.
that show up. And there are actually resources very specific to your nuanced thing in your family. And so we want to make sure that we share the best resources to help you with those small nuances. So, what is the website again, and how can they get in contact with you if they need you?
Okay, so there's 2 websites. There's my divorce coaching website, which is www.divorcecoachplus.com, and my number is 551-444-2609. Tell everyone 24/7 they can text me or call me, okay? I'm available for them. I do turn off my phone when I sleep, so they won't but I'm there. Then the divorcewithspecialneedschildren.com website is also a Facebook page, and that has resources for those. They can find me through there. It's myself and one other colleague, so they can find me there as well. So either of those places.
Awesome. And if you're stuck in traffic, you're driving, don't try and write all that down, right? If you are on a jog, whatever, you all know that all of that information is going to be on the show notes. So you can always access it. And if you do need to connect with Susan at any point, you can always reach out to me. info@risingbeyondpc.com. If you're like, oh, maybe I should reach out to Sybil, I'm telling you, it happens all the time. And I am going to connect you with whomever you need to be connected with. So, Susan, thank you so much. I know that there are people out there that were like, yes, all of this information is amazing, but I have a special needs child, so it doesn't quite work. And so, thank you for what you do and for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I want your listeners to know they're not alone and it will get better. What they're going through is temporary, but take advantage of resources like myself to help them get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for listening. I appreciate you. This is why we do what we do, is to help you all. So thank you so much. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Rising Beyond podcast.